The jungle was restless that night. Twin moons shined above the dark sky, and a deep growl moved across the trees. The predator clan was awake, their sharp eyes glowing in the shadows. They searched the ground, sniffing the air, calling out for their young ones. The cubs were gone. 3 small lives, barely old enough to walk, had vanished without a trace. The mother predator, larger than any beast in the valley, roared with rage. Her cry shook the branches. Every creature nearby went silent. The tribe of predators gathered around her, fear and anger burning in their voices. "Find them," the chief growled, his fangs glistening in the moonlight. "No one rests until the cubs are found." Warriors spread out through the jungle, their claws tearing at the soil as they searched. They followed scents, broken branches, and faint paw prints, but soon the tracks grew strange. The small prints stopped near the human camp. The human, the outsider, the one who lived alone near the river, was whispered about in the village. Many believed he was dangerous. Others thought he was weak prey, but now suspicion grew into fury. "He has them," one predator snarled. "He took the cubs." The mother's eyes blazed with fire. She raised her head and sniffed the air. The scent of her cubs was faint, but it lingered on the wind. And yes, it came from the direction of the human's shelter. Her roar shook the ground as she leapt forward. Hunters followed her, moving like shadows through the jungle. The human had no idea what storm was coming for him. He had built his camp with wooden stakes and a fire pit, living quietly, surviving day by day on what he could hunt or gather. He was used to the sounds of the night chirps, growls, rustling leaves, but tonight the jungle felt heavier, as if it held its breath. He stirred in his sleep, lying inside his small hut made from branches and cloth. The fire outside had burned low, sending smoke into the sky. A faint sound reached his ears, soft breathing, almost like purring. He frowned and shifted, feeling a strange weight pressing against his chest. When his eyes opened, the sight froze. Him in place, 3 small predator cubs curled up on him, their tiny claws gripping his shirt, their heads resting against his heartbeat, their fur warm, their eyes closed in peaceful sleep. For a moment he thought it was a dream, but when one cub twitched its ear and snuggled closer, he realized it was real. Fear rushed through him like fire. If the parents found this, they would tear him apart before he could speak. He looked at the cubs, their small chests rising and falling with every breath. They looked harmless, innocent, nothing like the terrifying hunters that ruled the jungle. He whispered softly, "Why are you here, little ones?" But of course they gave no answer, only a soft purr in reply outside. The jungle roared with searching cries. The predators were close. He could hear their heavy steps, their growls echoing through the night. His heart pounded. He knew he could not move. He could not even push the cubs away. If they cried out, if they woke and screamed for their mother, his life would end in seconds. The cubs shifted slightly, but stayed asleep. One stretched its paw across his chest as if claiming, "Him is safe." He froze again, sweat dripping down his face. The sound of snapping branches grew nearer. Glowing eyes appeared in the shadows outside his camp. The predators were here. The human's mind raced. Should he hide the cubs? Should he step outside and show his empty hands? Nothing seemed safe. The mother's roar thundered once more, and the cubs stirred in their sleep. One yawned softly, showing tiny sharp teeth, and then returned to rest. He could hear voices outside, deep growls and snarls. "The scent is strong here," one said. "He must have them," another voice growled back. "If he has harmed them, he dies tonight." The human's breath slowed. He held still, every muscle tight, his eyes fixed on the cubs, who were now the only barrier between life and death. The predators searched outside, their shadows sliding past the gaps in his hut. The air was heavy with tension. The cubs, unaware of the danger, slept on his chest as if he were their protector, their warmth pressed against him, their tiny hearts beating fast but steady. The night stretched long, and in that silence, the human understood one thing clearly. He had not chosen this, but fate had tied him to these cubs. And now the jungle would decide if he lived or died. And in the distance, the mother predator let out a cry that promised blood. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the distant roars of predators searching for their young. The human sat inside his hut, frozen in disbelief. 3 predator cubs still lay curled on his chest, their fur soft against his skin, their small bodies warm like tiny flames. He had seen many strange things since arriving on this alien world, but nothing like this. The cubs belonged to the most feared hunters of the jungle, creatures who could tear apart armored beasts with a single strike. And yet here they were, sleeping on him as if he was their parent. The human's breath came slow, careful not to wake them. Outside, he could hear the crunch of paws against leaves, the low growl of voices speaking in the predator tongue. They were searching. They were close. He knew if they entered his camp, no explanation would save him. The fire pit outside had burned down to glowing embers, its smoke drifting weakly into the sky. Shadows moved around the edges of his camp, glowing yellow eyes watching, waiting. The human's hand twitched toward the knife lying near his bed. But he did not move. Steel would not save him against a full pack. His thoughts raced. How had the cubs come here? Had they wandered off? Had something chased them into his shelter? Or was this fate playing a cruel game? He remembered the day he first saw their mother, a beast larger than 3 men, her fangs shining, her roar enough to shake the air. She had spared him once, only because he ran. Now her cubs lay against his chest, trusting him, as if they knew something he did not. The cubs stirred. One lifted its head and blinked, its eyes bright and curious. The human held his breath. The cub sniffed him, then pressed its small head against his chin, purring softly. It was a strange sound, one of comfort, not fear. He felt his heart twist. These creatures were supposed to see him as prey, yet they rested on him without fear, as if he was safety itself. He whispered in a soft voice, "Why me?" But the cubs only closed their eyes again and drifted back into sleep. The voices outside grew louder. "The scent is strong." One predator growled, "He has them, I know it." Another replied, "We should tear him apart. The mother wants blood." The human's eyes darted to the walls of his hut. Thin sticks and cloth. Nothing that could stop them if they attacked. His mind screamed for a plan, but no plan came. He thought of running, but where could he go? The jungle belonged to them. Every path was their hunting ground. He thought of hiding the cubs, but they clung to him like he was their den. Even if he placed them down, they would follow. A shadow passed the doorway, massive and silent. The human's body stiffened. He recognized the shape, the mother herself. Her breath was deep and ragged, her eyes glowing with fire. She stood only a few steps away, separated from him by a thin wall of branches. The cub shifted again. One yawned, showing tiny teeth. The sound was small but sharp. The mother froze outside, her ears twitching, her head lowering to listen. Her cubs were near, very near. The human's heart thundered in his chest. Sweat rolled down his forehead. He dared not breathe. One wrong move, one sound, and the hut would explode in claws and blood. But then, something strange happened. The cubs purred louder, their small bodies pressed closer to him. The sound carried through the thin walls. The mother outside stopped growling. Silence filled the jungle, broken only by the soft rumble of her children. The human felt his throat tighten. The mother was listening, and she knew they were alive. But she also knew they were with him. The camp fell into a tense stillness. Every creature nearby waited for her decision, kill or spare. The human kept his arms still, not daring to touch the cubs, not daring to speak. The mother released a low growl, not of fury, but of warning. She stepped back, her heavy steps fading into the distance. The other predators followed, their eyes glowing as they vanished into the jungle. The human finally let out the breath he had been holding, his body shaking. He looked down at the cubs who still lay on his chest, completely unaware of the danger that had just passed. They slept peacefully, their tails curled, their warmth pressing against him. He whispered softly, "You're going to get me killed." But there was no anger in his voice, only a strange mix of fear and wonder. As the jungle quieted, the human realized something deeper. The cubs had not come to him by accident. They had chosen him, and now their lives were tied to his. Whether he wanted it or not, he closed his eyes, listening to the soft purrs against his chest, knowing that the night was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, the predators would return, and when they did, he would have to face them. The jungle was not safe, and now, with the cubs by his side, it was even more dangerous. Yet a strange thought whispered in his mind. Perhaps the cubs had brought him more than danger. Perhaps they had brought him a chance, a bond that even the fiercest hunters could not break. But until morning came, he could only lie still, his fate resting in the paws of the sleeping cubs. The jungle did not rest. Even as the moons began to sink behind the distant peaks, the predators spread across the land like shadows, their roars echoing in the valleys, their sharp noses pressed against the earth. They hunted for the missing cubs with unshaken rage. Every warrior in the clan moved with deadly speed, their claws digging into the soil, their eyes glowing bright in the darkness. The air smelled of fear. The tribe knew their leader's cubs were more than children. They were the future of the clan. To lose them meant weakness, and weakness meant death to all. The mother predator walked at the front, her massive frame cutting through trees as if they were twigs. Her roar thundered again and again, each cry calling to her cubs, but no answer came. Only silence behind her. The hunters growled among themselves. "The scent is clear," one sighed. "It leads toward the river," another snarled. "The human lives there. I told you he was trouble." The word human spread through the pack like poison. Suspicion hardened into anger. They had seen him before, small compared to them, fragile in body, yet stubborn enough to live alone on their world. He built his fires, cut his wood, and refused to leave. Many had wanted to kill him from the start, but their leader allowed him to live. Now with the cubs gone, that choice seemed a mistake. The mother's eyes burned with fury, but deep inside her chest there was fear, a fear only a mother knew. Every beat of her heart screamed for her children. Every sound of the jungle made her ears twitch. What if something worse had taken them? What if another beast had swallowed them whole? The hunters followed the trail carefully, each broken branch, each crushed leaf, until at last they reached the edge of the human's camp. Smoke curled into the night sky from the remains of his fire. Their noses flared. The scent of cubs was strong here, stronger than anywhere else. The mother lowered her head and sniffed the ground, her nostrils flaring, her body tensed. Yes, this was it. The cubs had been here. Her fangs glistened in the dim light. She turned to her hunters, and in a voice that rumbled like thunder, she growled, "He has them." The words fell heavy. No one dared to argue. Warriors surrounded the camp, their claws ready, their breath steaming in the cold night air. They waited for the order. One command and the human would be torn apart. Inside the camp, the human sat still, the cubs still pressed against him. His ears caught the sound of claws scraping bark. Heavy footsteps circling his hut. He swallowed hard. The hunters were here. He knew if he stepped outside, they would not listen. They would not wait. The cubs purred softly, their small bodies moving gently with each breath. They had no fear of the storm outside, but the human felt it in his bones. One mistake and his blood would stain the soil. Suddenly, the silence broke. A branch snapped outside. A roar thundered through the camp. The ground trembled as the mother predator stepped forward, her glowing eyes fixed on the human's shelter. Her chest rose and fell like a great furnace. Her voice roared. "Give them back," the hunters answered with snarls. Shaking the trees with their rage, the human's hand reached for his knife again. Though he knew it was useless, his other hand held the cubs closer without meaning to. As if protecting them, the cubs stirred at the sound of their mother. One raised its head and squeaked. The sound was small but sharp. The human froze, fear exploding inside him. If they cried too loudly, the mother would know for certain. The cub squeaked again, but instead of leaving, it pressed its head back against the human's chest, choosing warmth over the call outside. The mother growled. She heard her cubs, but the sound was strange, muffled, as if wrapped in something else. The hunters looked at one another, confused. The scent was strong. But why had the cubs not run out? Why were they still hidden? The mother's fury grew hotter. Her claws dug deep into the soil, her patience breaking. "Tear it apart," she roared. But just as the hunters stepped forward, the cubs purred louder. The sound rolled like a soft song. The jungle fell still. The human felt it rumble against his chest, their tiny hearts beating against him. The predators outside hesitated. The sound was not of fear, not of pain, but of peace. The cubs were alive, they were safe. The hunters looked back at their leader, waiting. The mother snarled low, torn between rage and confusion. Her ears twitched again. She knew the cubs. She knew their voices. But why would they purr with a human? Why would they sleep on him as if he was family? The human's chest tightened, his breath shallow. He could almost feel the mother's eyes burning through the walls. He thought of running. He thought of fighting. But he knew neither would save him. The cubs clung to him tighter, as if making the choice for him. The hunters circled again, restless, waiting for blood. But the mother raised her head. Her glowing eyes narrowed, and with a voice heavy as stone she growled, "Not yet." The human sat frozen in the silence that followed, his heart beating like thunder. He had been spared, but not forgiven. The hunt was not over. It had only begun. The jungle did not rest. Even as the moons began to sink behind the distant peaks, the predators spread across the land like shadows, their roars echoing in the valleys, their sharp noses pressed against the earth. They hunted for the missing cubs with unshaken rage. Every warrior in the clan moved with deadly speed, their claws digging into the soil, their eyes glowing bright in the darkness. The air smelled of fear. The tribe knew their leader's cubs were more than children. They were the future of the clan. To lose them meant weakness, and weakness meant death to all. The mother predator walked at the front, her massive frame cutting through trees as if they were twigs. Her roar thundered again and again, each cry calling to her cubs, but no answer came. Only silence behind her. The hunters growled among themselves. "The scent is clear," one sighed. "It leads toward the river," another snarled. "The human lives there. I told you he was trouble." The word human spread through the pack like poison. Suspicion hardened into anger. They had seen him before, small compared to them, fragile in body, yet stubborn enough to live alone on their world. He built his fires, cut his wood, and refused to leave. Many had wanted to kill him from the start, but their leader allowed him to live. Now with the cubs gone, that choice seemed a mistake. The mother's eyes burned with fury, but deep inside her chest there was fear, a fear only a mother knew. Every beat of her heart screamed for her children. Every sound of the jungle made her ears twitch. What if something worse had taken them? What if another beast had swallowed them whole? The hunters followed the trail carefully, each broken branch, each crushed leaf, until at last they reached the edge of the human's camp. Smoke curled into the night sky from the remains of his fire. Their noses flared. The scent of cubs was strong here, stronger than anywhere else. The mother lowered her head and sniffed the ground, her nostrils flaring, her body tensed. Yes, this was it. The cubs had been here. Her fangs glistened in the dim light. She turned to her hunters, and in a voice that rumbled like thunder, she growled, "He has them." The words fell heavy. No one dared to argue. Warriors surrounded the camp, their claws ready, their breath steaming in the cold night air. They waited for the order. One command and the human would be torn apart. Inside the camp, the human sat still, the cubs still pressed against him. His ears caught the sound of claws scraping bark. Heavy footsteps circling his hut. He swallowed hard. The hunters were here. He knew if he stepped outside, they would not listen. They would not wait. The cubs purred softly, their small bodies moving gently with each breath. They had no fear of the storm outside. but the human felt it in his bones. One mistake and his blood would stain the soil. Suddenly, the silence broke. A branch snapped outside. A roar thundered through the camp. The ground trembled as the mother predator stepped forward, her glowing eyes fixed on the human's shelter. Her chest rose and fell like a great furnace. Her voice roared. "Give them back," the hunters answered with snarls. Shaking the trees with their rage, the human's hand reached for his knife again. Though he knew it was useless, his other hand held the cubs closer without meaning to. As if protecting them, the cubs stirred at the sound of their mother. One raised its head and squeaked. The sound was small but sharp. The human froze, fear exploding inside him. If they cried too loudly, the mother would know for certain. The cub squeaked again, but instead of leaving, it pressed its head back against the human's chest, choosing warmth over the call outside. The mother growled. She heard her cubs, but the sound was strange, muffled, as if wrapped in something else. The hunters looked at one another, confused. The scent was strong. But why had the cubs not run out? Why were they still hidden? The mother's fury grew hotter. Her claws dug deep into the soil, her patience breaking. "Tear it apart," she roared. But just as the hunters stepped forward, the cubs purred louder. The sound rolled like a soft song. The jungle fell still. The human felt it rumble against his chest, their tiny hearts beating against him. The predators outside hesitated. The sound was not of fear, not of pain, but of peace. The cubs were alive, they were safe. The hunters looked back at their leader. Waiting, the mother snarled low, torn between rage and confusion. Her ears twitched again. She knew the cubs. She knew their voices. But why would they purr with a human? Why would they sleep on him as if he was family? The human's chest tightened, his breath shallow. He could almost feel the mother's eyes burning through the walls. He thought of running. He thought of fighting. But he knew neither would save him. The cubs clung to him tighter, as if making the choice for him. The hunters circled again, restless, waiting for blood, but the mother raised her head. Her glowing eyes narrowed, and with a voice heavy as stone she growled, "Not yet." The human sat frozen in the silence that followed, his heart beating like thunder. He had been spared, but not forgiven. The hunt was not over. It had only begun. The night stretched long, but the human did not sleep. The cubs rested against him, soft and warm, their purrs rising and falling like waves on a calm sea. His body was tense, his eyes wide, because outside, he knew the hunters still watched. The mother still waited. He wondered how long this strange moment could last. Why had the cubs chosen him? Why did they not run back to their kind? He looked at their small faces, their closed eyes, their soft ears twitching at every sound. They seemed so peaceful, as if they had always belonged here. He remembered his first months on this world. Alone, hunted, barely alive, he had built his shelter piece by piece, learning which fruits he could eat, which streams carried clean water, and which beasts to avoid. More than once he had faced the predators of this jungle, and more than once he had been sure his life was ending. One memory burned sharper than the rest. A hunt weeks ago, he had stumbled upon one of the predator adults, its leg caught in a metal snare left behind by ancient machines. It had roared at him, snapping its jaws, ready to kill even in pain. He had aimed his spear, ready to strike, but something inside him stopped his hand. Instead, he cut the snare loose. Keeping just far enough away, the beast limped free, glaring at him with golden eyes. It had not attacked. It had only roared once and vanished into the trees. He never knew if it remembered him, or if it cared. Now, as he looked at the cubs, he wondered, could they somehow know? Could they sense that moment of mercy? The cubs shifted again. One climbed up onto his shoulder and pawed gently at his chin. Another curled closer into his arm. The third stretched out and gave a tiny yawn. Their trust was clear. It wrapped around him like an invisible chain. Outside, the jungle had gone quiet. The hunters no longer roared, but he could feel them in the darkness, their eyes watching, their claws itching. They would not forget. They would not forgive, not yet. The human stood slowly, careful not to wake the cubs. He stepped out of his hut, the moon still cast there. Pale light. His campfire was little more than smoke and ash. The jungle looked calm, but he knew better. Danger waited between every tree. He gathered more wood for the fire. Moving softly, always watching the shadows, the cubs stirred at his absence. And when he returned, they crawled back onto him, as if unwilling to be left behind. He sat near the fire, staring at the flames. His mind heavy, he had come to this planet searching for a place to survive, not for companionship, not for family. Yet somehow he now had 3 small lives bound to him. The flames cracked softly. He whispered, "You should not be here." His voice low, almost sad. "Your kind will kill me if they find us together." But the cubs did not care. They purred louder, their small bodies pressing against him. The bond grew deeper with every moment. He felt it in his chest, in the way their warmth softened his fear, in the way their tiny claws clung to his shirt, as if they would never let go. Far away, a roar split the silence. The mother predator still searched. Her voice thundered through the trees, calling her young. The cubs' ears twitched, but none of them left his side. Instead they pressed closer, choosing the steady beat of his heart over the cry of their blood. The human shivered. The choice frightened him. If the mother saw this, she would not understand. She would see betrayal. She would see theft. But at the same time, he felt something else. A strange light inside him. Something that had been missing since he came to this harsh world. He had lost his old family long ago, lost friends, lost his home, now against all reason. These alien cubs gave him a piece of that back. Morning came slowly, the sun's rising over the trees. The jungle shimmered in golden light. The cubs stirred. Awake, their bright eyes blinking at the world, they stretched. They played with his hands. They tugged on his shirt with their tiny teeth. They did not fear him, they welcomed him. The human laughed softly, a sound he had not made in a long time. It felt strange in his throat, but it also felt right. But the peace could not last. From the shadows beyond the camp, more glowing eyes appeared, hunters watching, waiting. The human's smile faded. He knew the bond was real, but it was also dangerous. The cubs had chosen him, but the predators had not, and soon the clan would demand their children back. The human stood slowly, the cubs crawling up onto his shoulders. One perched on his head, another clung to his arm, the third nestled into his chest. He sighed. "You are trouble, little ones, but maybe you are also hope." He looked out into the jungle, his eyes hard. The bond between him and the cubs was no longer just strange chance. It was a test, a line drawn by fate. And whether he lived or died, he knew this bond would change everything. Asterisk. The suns climbed higher, spilling light through the thick jungle canopy. The human moved carefully, his camp no longer safe. He felt the eyes watching him from the shadows, glowing with suspicion and hate. The cubs clung to him as he walked, their small bodies refusing to leave his side. He had thought of hiding them, of placing them in the tall grass and stepping away. But each time he tried, the cubs cried out softly, following him no matter where he went. It was as if an invisible thread bound them together, unbreakable. The jungle grew louder as the day stretched on. Birds screeched, insects hummed, and far in the distance, roars shook the trees. The predators were restless. They wanted blood. By noon, the hunters revealed themselves, stepping from the shadows into the light. Their bodies tall and powerful, their claws curved like blades, their golden eyes locked on him. They did not hide anymore. They wanted him to see. They wanted him to know he was surrounded. The human stopped in a wide clearing, sunlight spilling across the grass. The cub shifted nervously in his arms. The ground beneath his feet felt too open, too exposed, but he had no choice. They had driven him here. The mother predator appeared last, her massive frame pushing through the trees. Her roar filled the air, shaking the leaves. The cubs perked their ears at the sound. but none leapt from the human's arms. Instead, they pressed closer to him, their small bodies trembling. The hunters growled in anger, their voices rumbling like thunder. "Thief," one spat. "He has stolen the young," another snarled. "He hides them from their mother." The circle tightened, each step cutting off his escape. The human's heart pounded in his chest. Sweat rolled down his back. He raised his hands slowly, showing he carried no weapon. The cubs clung tighter, refusing to let go. "I did not take them," he said, his voice steady though fear burned inside him. "They came to me on their own." His words were carried by the wind, but the predators only hissed, their claws scratching the dirt. The mother stepped forward, towering above him, her golden eyes fixed on the cubs in his arms. Her growl was low, dangerous. "Give them back." The cubs squeaked, wriggling slightly, but still they did not leave him. One nuzzled against his chest, another pawed at his shirt. Their tiny voices rose in soft purrs. The clearing fell silent. The hunters froze. The sight was unnatural, impossible. The cubs should have leapt into their mother's arms, yet they stayed with the human. The mother's eyes narrowed, her muscles tensed. Her roar burst forth, shaking the air. "You have bewitched them," the hunters roared with her. The jungle itself seemed to tremble. The human knew one wrong move meant death. But he did not run. He did not beg. Instead, he lowered himself slowly to the ground, setting the cubs gently before him, his palms open, his eyes locked on the mother. The cubs blinked at him, confused, then turned toward their mother. The human's breath caught in his chest. This was the moment. This was the test, but instead of running to her, the cubs turned back, crawling onto his lap once more, their purrs louder than before. The hunters snarled in shock, their claws dug into the soil. Some called for his death. Others stepped back in uncertainty. The mother's rage blazed hotter, but behind it flickered confusion. Her cubs had chosen. The human met her burning gaze. His voice low but firm. "I do not harm them, I protect them." He placed a hand over his chest, where the cubs now curled against him again. "If you want them, you will take my life with theirs." The hunters shifted uneasily. His words were bold, foolish, yet something in his stance made them hesitate. The mother roared again, louder than before. The cubs squeaked, their tiny voices answering her cry, but they stayed where they were, their small bodies pressed against the human. The jungle stilled, all life waiting for her choice. Would she strike, or would she listen? The human's arms trembled, not from fear but from the weight of the moment. He had no power here, no strength against their fury, yet somehow the cubs had given him something more, a bond, a shield stronger than any weapon. The mother's eyes burned into him, searching, testing. Her growl faded into silence. She stepped closer, the ground shaking under her weight. She lowered her massive head until her golden eyes were inches from his face, her hot breath washing over him. The cubs chirped softly, one climbing onto his shoulder, another stretching toward her. The mother inhaled deeply, the scent of her young strong, but mingled with the human's. The clearing held its breath. Then the mother stepped back, her voice a low rumble. "Not yet," the hunters hissed. Some snarled in protest, but none disobeyed. The circle broke, their massive bodies retreating into the jungle. The mother lingered last, her gaze still fixed on him. Then she turned and vanished with the others. The human sagged with relief, his chest heaving. The cubs purred louder, their warmth pressing against him. The danger had passed, but only for now. He whispered softly, "You have tied me to them, little ones. And now the jungle will not forgive." Above, the suns burned bright, but the shadows of the jungle grew longer. The confrontation had ended, but the true test was only beginning. Asterisk. The jungle was heavy with silence after the confrontation. The human sat in the clearing, the cubs still curled against him, their soft purrs a strange comfort against the storm that had just passed. His body shook with exhaustion, but his mind was sharp. He knew the predators would not leave this matter unsettled. The hunters had vanished into the trees, yet their presence lingered like smoke. He felt their eyes even when he could not see them. The mother had spared him, but her words still echoed in his mind. Not yet. He looked down at the cubs. They played. With his shirt nipping gently at his fingers, their innocence was a shield. But it was also a chain. They had chosen him, and because of that, he had become part of their world. The day passed slowly. Every sound of the jungle made him tense. A rustle of leaves, a distant roar. Each reminded him that danger was never far. He gathered food, filled his water flask, and tried to keep moving, always careful, always watching the trees. The cubs followed no matter what he did, stumbling clumsily but never letting him leave their sight. By evening, the call came, a roar unlike the others. It was deep and commanding. It rolled across the jungle like thunder. The human froze. He recognized it, the voice of the chief predator, the leader of the clan. The ground trembled as they came. Hunters stepping from the shadows, their golden eyes burning. They formed a half circle around the clearing, their bodies tense, their claws ready. The mother stood with them, her eyes still fixed on him. But this time, she did not lead. She waited. The chief predator stepped forward, taller and broader than the rest, his mane dark, his fangs glistening in the fading light. His voice shook the ground. "Human," he growled. "You hold what is not yours." The human stood slowly, the cubs clinging to his legs, his breath steady, though fear pressed against his ribs. "I did not take them," he answered. "They chose me." A low growl rippled through the hunters, but the chief raised a claw, silencing them. His eyes narrowed, sharp and testing. "If that is true, prove it." The human's brow furrowed. "How?" he asked, his voice tight. The chief's growl deepened. "A trial," he said. "A test of trust. If the cubs remain with you through it, then you are what they believe you are. If they turn from you, then you are nothing, and you die." The hunters roared in approval, their voices shaking the canopy. The cubs squeaked at the sound, pressing closer to the human. He clenched his fists. A trial. He had no choice. If he refused, they would kill him. If he accepted, he might still die. But perhaps fate would give him a chance. The predators led him from the clearing, through twisting vines and thick shadows, until they reached a canyon where the river cut deep into the earth. The roar of water filled the air. The cliffs were jagged. Sharp rocks jutted from the rushing current below. The chief pointed with one massive claw. "Cross," he growled. "With them." His golden eyes flicked to the cubs who clung tightly to the human's arms. "If they stay with you, you live. If they fall, you die." The humans stared at the river. The current churned with deadly force. One wrong step would mean death. He looked at the cubs, their eyes wide, their tiny claws clutching his shirt. He breathed deep, steadying himself, then stepped onto the narrow rocks. The hunters watched from the cliffs, their eyes glowing, their voices low with anticipation. The rocks were slick with moss. The water sprayed upward, cold against his face. Each step felt like walking on knives. His balance wavered, but the cubs clung to him, their purrs soft but steady. Halfway across, the current grew stronger, the roar of the water deafening. A stone shifted under his foot. He nearly fell. The cub squeaked. One slipped slightly, its claws digging into his arm. He gritted his teeth and pulled it close. Holding all three tighter, the hunters roared from above. Some in mockery, some in excitement. The chief watched in silence, his eyes like burning suns. The human moved step by step, his muscles burning, his heart hammering. Yet the cubs never let go, their tiny bodies trembling but refusing to leave him. Finally, with one last step, he reached the far side. He collapsed to his knees, the cubs still in his arms, safe, alive. The jungle went silent. The hunters stared, their growls fading into whispers. The mother's eyes widened slightly. Her cubs had chosen, and they had chosen him. The chief stepped forward, his voice deep and heavy. "The trial is done," he growled. "The bond is real." He turned his head toward the others. "He is not prey." The hunters roared again, this time not in rage but in respect. Their voices rolled like thunder, The jungle itself seemed to bow. The humans sat with the cubs, exhausted but alive. He had passed their test. But he knew this was only the beginning. The mother stepped closer. Her massive shadow falling over him, she lowered her head, sniffed the cubs, then growled softly, not in anger, but in acceptance. The cubs purred louder, pressing against both. Her and the human, the bond was sealed. The jungle had given him a place. Not as prey, not as enemy, but as protector, and perhaps as something more. The jungle lay quiet after the trial. The echoes of the hunter's roars still hung in the air. The human sat on the river's edge, his chest heaving, his body trembling with exhaustion. The cubs were safe in his arms, their small hearts beating fast. Their fur damp from the spray of the river. He looked at them, tiny creatures who had changed his fate in a single night. They were no longer just cubs of the predators. They were something more, a bond that tied him to this world. The hunters stood at the cliffs, their glowing eyes fixed on him, but their rage was gone, replaced with something heavier, something older, respect. The chief predator raised his head, his voice a growl that rolled like thunder. "He is not prey," he declared. "He carries the bond. He carries the trust." His words spread through the hunters. Some growled in protest, but none dared challenge. The mother predator stepped forward, her massive form moving with grace and power. Her eyes locked on him. She lowered her head until her golden eyes were level with his. Her breath hot and heavy. The cubs chirped at her, their tiny voices filled with joy, but still they clung to him. The mother growled softly. Not with anger, but with acceptance. She reached out, her nose brushing against the cubs, then against the human. Her scent marked him, not as prey, not as enemy, but as protector. The hunters bowed their heads slightly, a sign of reluctant agreement. The jungle itself seemed to pause, as if recognizing the change. The human exhaled slowly, his body sagging with relief, but deep inside, he knew this was not the end. He had survived the trial, but survival was not enough. The cubs had chosen him, and now he carried a responsibility greater than his own life. Days passed. The clan did not kill him. They did not drive him away. Instead they watched, always from the shadows, their golden eyes following him wherever he went. He was tested in small ways, a predator blocking his path, another circling his camp, but never striking, always watching how he moved, how he treated the cubs. He built his camp stronger, walls reinforced with stone and wood. The cubs played around him, chasing insects, tumbling over each other, sometimes biting his boots. Their laughter like squeaks filled the air. For the first time in years, the humans smiled often. But danger still lurked in the jungle. Beasts larger than the predators roamed the valleys, scaled creatures with teeth like spears, serpents that moved through the rivers like shadows. The cubs were not safe alone, and so he became their shield. One night, a beast attacked, drawn by the cubs' cries. It was long and armored, its jaws wide enough to swallow him whole. The human stood firm, fire in one hand, spear in the other. The cubs behind him, the predator clan, watched from the trees, waiting, testing. The beast struck, its fangs crashing down. The human rolled aside, fire bursting across its scales. His spear struck true, piercing its neck. The creature roared and fell into the river, its body swallowed by the current. The cubs chirped and ran to him, nuzzling against his legs, purring with relief. The hunters growled low, but not in anger, in respect. The human had not only survived, he had defended what was not his own. The chief predator stepped forward once more, his voice deep. "He has proven it," he growled. "He stands with them, not against them. He is protector." The word carried weight. It rolled through the clan, through the trees. Even the mother predator's eyes softened. She looked at her cubs, safe and alive, then at the human, standing tall though his body bled. She lowered her head in respect. The bond was sealed not by choice, but by trial, by fire, by blood. From that night, the jungle changed. The human was no longer prey. The hunters no longer hunted him. Instead, they walked near his camp. Watching, guarding from afar, his fire no longer marked weakness. It marked the place of a protector. The cubs grew stronger each day, their claws sharper, their bodies faster, yet they never left his side. They played, they hunted small prey. But each night they returned, curling against him as if he was their den. The human often looked at them in silence, his heart heavy but warm. He had come to this world with nothing, but now he had found something worth fighting for, something worth dying for. And as the suns rose one morning, painting the sky with fire, the jungle roared with life. The predators raised their heads and howled to the heavens, their voices a song of unity. The human stood among them, the cubs at his feet, the bond clear for all to see. He was no longer just a man surviving on a hostile world. He was protector, he was family, and the jungle would never forget.